Hard count meetings rolling right along. If you're new to the show, welcome. This is a segment where we kind of do not a year in review, but kind of just an all-encompassing look at what's going on with certain programs and certain head coaches across the country. Like I just mentioned, going to take a look at Florida and Billy Napier, because whether you are a Tennessee fan or whether you're an Ohio State fan, you probably have a strong opinion on Billy Napier one way or the other as to it being positive or negative. Well, we're going to give you our opinion right now on where things stand with Florida. First things first, make sure you're subscribed. Florida fans, had a lot of y'all join the party here within the last month or so. We're glad to have y'all here. If you haven't yet subscribed, no time like the present. Got a intense season ahead of Florida. Going to talk about the Gators a lot, so make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate you so much in advance for that. So when it comes to Florida and Billy Napier, there's a couple of different lenses we have to view them through. There's a couple of different lenses they get viewed through, rather. There's the macro level, which punchline culture has had a field day with, okay? The punchline culture is essentially anyone who can get some likes or some retweets or some clicks off of making a joke, they do that. They make a punchline, and there's that whole culture around it, and they have had a field day with Florida. Because they went 5-7, because of Billy Napier being from the Sun Belt Conference, people like to make jokes about Florida. So there's this perception of Florida and their 5-7 season that Florida's not any good. That's the perception. However, context is crucial to any discussion, especially in college football. And here's what the context is for Florida in 2023. This is not trying to give you the glass half full view. This is just facts. Florida was 2 plays away from being 7-5. If they hold Missouri on that 4th down and long, win that football game against a highly ranked Missouri football team. If you hit that 44-yard field goal against Arkansas, that's another win. Okay, so that's 2 plays decided by one, or 2 games rather, decided by 1 play that made the difference on how we view their season. Now, I would also remind you that Florida, the expectation for them coming into this season in Vegas, the win total was over under 5.5 wins. So we're looking at that 5-7 record, and people are making jokes, and people are saying things about Billy Napier. Well, y'all, that was the expectation coming into the year. They would be around that 5 or 6 win mark. And they were, again, 2 plays away from being a 7-win football team. Now, woulda, shoulda, coulda, but you understand now the context within Florida is very, very important when we assess where they stand. Because there's a lot of people now pointing to year 3, myself included, saying, all right, this is a we need it kind of year in Gainesville. We need to see some positive things to get us encouraged about the future under Billy Napier and, quite honestly, his future as the head coach at Florida. Now, transparently, we pull for Billy Napier. We think he's a program guy with how he carries himself. I think he's had a tough hand that he's been dealt with everything that he's had to try and build up at Florida, because this is what I want to make sure we say too. There is this perception around what they haven't done acquiring talent and where the recruiting class ranks, and then there's what was there before he got there. And I'm speaking, of course, to Dan Mullen, the way that he recruited, and there's sort of become this narrative now that, well, Billy Napier actually isn't that great at acquiring talent, period. Well, hang on, let's again, context is key to this discussion around Billy Napier. You recruit in a lot of ways by the ammunition that you provide by having success on the football field. Well, you have success on the football field by what's on your roster. Well, Billy Napier and what was on the roster previously, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't deep, especially on the defensive side of the football. So Billy Napier's been trying to build this thing up and have something to go recruit with, and it's been a little bit of a trial and error. So what I'm trying to say here is, again, I'm not making excuses for Billy Napier. I'm just saying we got to approach this with the right context. Because in 2024, that schedule is absolutely brutal, especially in November. But I want us to understand now, there's been a lot of things that you can point to at Florida in 2023 that are positives that I think you have to tie to coaching. Graham Mertz, what he was at Wisconsin and what he has been at Florida in 1 year, night and day difference. I think you attribute that to coaching. Eugene Wilson, stud true freshman for them this past season, making him a focal point of the offense, recognizing, hey, this is a ball player. We got to make sure we involve him consistently. That's coaching. Battling back against South Carolina, down 10 in the 4th, and finding a way to win that football game. That's coaching. That's also buy-in. So you can say what you want about being 5-7 and have the punchline culture and all that, but like you look at Florida, it's not all negatives. Within the context, there's a lot to be encouraged by and a lot to draw from. But again, year 3 is going to be where we start to make some definitive statements about what they are and about who Billy Napier is as the head coach at Florida. And I think that's fair. So going back to context here, talking about those 2 plays being the difference in 2 games, that's the key thing I want us to focus on here, because 5-7 from a macro level sounds unfortunate. It is unfortunate. There's nothing positive about it. But let's not pretend that there wasn't an opportunity there for them to have a very different story being told this season. Because if they got to 7 wins, then we're saying, oh, great, okay, that's a 1-win improvement. Billy Napier's hasn't it trending in the right direction. Year 3 is a show me year. So if they got blown out in 7 games and had a 5-7 season, you would talk about them differently than you would right now with those 2 games swinging a different direction. I'm not trying to overly harp on those, on that record, but I think that's really important that we all get aligned on exactly what just happened in Gainesville this past season. So looking forward now, and that's kind of the point I want to get to here. What has to happen for Billy Napier? I think you have to check the box for phase 3 in year 3. Because year 1, you kind of get to do, essentially whatever you had to do in year 1. Like year 1, no one's really tying you to when it comes to your achievements or lack thereof or whatever. Like year 1, you chalk it up to being year 1. Year 2 now, the goal was to have progress. 7 wins was what we said at the beginning of the year they needed to get. They did not get to that. So phase 2 was, in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, I think in-house at Florida too, I think it was a mission not accomplished. But with that being said now, you can fail an exam and still ace the final if it's cumulative. Like just because they had a poor year 2 doesn't mean year 3 can't be what they need it to be. And what I'm trying to say here is the results on the field don't always correlate to what's happening from a growth perspective in-house. I'm not telling you what it is or what it isn't, but I am saying that's something we have to consider here going forward under Billy Napier and for this team here in year 3. I think for Billy Napier and for Florida to be encouraged about where they're headed, I think 8 wins is probably a realistic thing to talk about. Now, when it comes to the line in Vegas that I think we'll get in the preseason, looking at this schedule, I think it'll be somewhere around an over-under of 6. But I think for them to get to that 8-win mark, they have to be somewhere in the range of 6-1 heading into November. Because in November, that would mean you have to get 2 of games against Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and at Florida State. Okay, so through those first 7, got some tricky games. You got Miami, who knows what they are with Cam Ward. You're at Tennessee, Kentucky. There's a lot of things within that first 7 that could be tricky, but I'm just saying I think that's the road you have to really look at because November will be brutal. November will be absolutely brutal by nature of the opponents that I just mentioned. But if you can get to 8 wins, I think you feel good about the trajectory. I think you feel good about the progress. And I think we talk about this past year as an unfortunate happening, but we think about Billy Napier and Florida getting back on track. Last thing I'll say, it's very tough to win in the SEC. Like, I almost want to grade Billy Napier on a curve, because like you're adding Texas to the conference, you're adding Oklahoma to the conference, and you have to play at Texas this year if you're Florida. And it's very different to build a program in a different conference than it is to build it in the SEC where you got guys like Brian Kelly, Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian. Like the conference itself is so difficult to win in regardless of where you are from a roster standpoint, but to have to recruit against those guys and be able to compete against those guys on a Saturday in and Saturday out, a reality. Nobody's making excuses for Billy Napier. No one's saying it's okay or excusing it, but I do think it deserves, again, a little bit of an extra context component added to it when you assess what he is and what Florida is going forward. So all that's to say, we openly pull for Billy Napier right here on this program. I love the way that he has not backed down from anything that's, no pun intended, has not backed down from anything that has come his way at Florida. And I would love nothing more than for them to go out and win 8 football games and for Graham Mertz to take another step forward and for them to have some success this year. But again, I think that's probably what it will take for you to feel secure moving forward into the future. I'm not making a prediction on his job security or anything like that, but I am saying I think 8 wins would be the place that you would feel comfortable at, or we would feel comfortable at least, depending on how that looks with Billy Napier going forward. So let me know how you feel about Florida. Let me know how you feel about Billy Napier. On Twitter and on Instagram, at JD Piquel is the best place for you to shoot those responses to. Make sure you follow me as well. We got a lot to unpack here going forward into this spring season of college football. Before you know it here, they'll be playing spring football games. We'll be unpacking those and talking about some way too early rankings and some breakout players and all that. So again, make sure you subscribe. We appreciate y'all for doing so. We appreciate y'all and we love y'all for being a part of this program. We're going to keep the party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.